One of the essential weaknesses of theories such as the foregoing, which so often have been offered to explain the origin of the attitudes which primitive man entertains toward the animal kingdom at large, or particular members of it, has been the transformation of rather plausible descriptive generalizations into what are deemed to be explanations of the phenomena in question. Animism, for example, is valid enough as a general statement, but it does not explain or elucidate for us the veneration of any particular species. A similar fallacy lurks in the theory that animals which are feared or considered more powerful than man, or dangerous to him, are worshipped for these reasons. These same criticism applies to the emphasis upon the economic relationship as a causal factor. It is perfectly true, of course, that in certain cases animals which are useful, feared, or thought to possess superhuman capabilities are propitiated and held in special esteem. But this descriptive correlation is far from being a universal one, and without consideration of alternative possibilities cannot be used to prove a causal relationship. The use of broad and vaguely defined categories for purposes of classification, as, for example, animal worship, also serves to obscure fundamental problems. At first glance, they appear to be useful because the emphasis is upon similarities, and although these are generally of the most superficial character, yet when data are assembled from peoples in all parts of the world, the general effect is apt to be impressive. Categories soon turn into ready-made catch-alls, into which customs and attitudes are hastily thrust without a previous study of their integration into the cultural patterns from which they have been taken. Nor is due weight given to the diverse historical background of the culture from which they come, nor to their appearance at epochs widely separated in time. Furthermore, a classification on the basis of similarity generally causes differences in customs and beliefs to be ignored, minimized, or glossed over. Indeed, the unsatisfactory character of these broad classifications of cultural phenomena and the theoretical deductions which are so often based upon them become more and more apparent the closer one grapples with the data of specific cultures in their totality. To understand, for example, the position of animals in the thought of any one people is far from an easy task. Just as, economically, all of the animals of a people's habitat are not considered of equal importance, it is likewise found that in subjective evaluation, and particularly in their association with magico-religious concepts, some creatures rank higher than others. Moreover, those which are of major importance economically are not always the creatures which enter most intimately into the magico-religious pattern of the group, while in other cases there may be a high degree of correlation. In the artistic sphere, the animals which appear most conspicuously as a decorative motif may or may not be the same ones which figure prominently in mythology or upon which economic dependence is placed. Again, there may or may not be a correlation between these and those to which are attributed the most powerful supernatural abilities. Each culture exhibits its own peculiar combination of features which cannot be deduced from any general principles of association. It is only as we comprehend specific cultures in terms of their own range of values and concrete expression that the role of animals in their life and thought becomes intelligible. Only in this setting do qualitative terms such as fear, respect, reverence, regard, worship, etc. have any real force as descriptions of subjective attitudes toward the animal world. Get all that? It is the reverse of this process of detailed cultural analysis that has led to the hasty classification of data and broad interpretive generalizations which, plausible enough in some cases and of some value as working hypotheses, are nevertheless found to be useful to either describe or explain the differential features of specific cultures. Another point which needs emphasis is suggested by an examination of the attitudes manifested toward nature and the animal world in particular cultures. This is a fact that man does not envisage natural phenomena afresh, but looks out upon animal and plant life of his environment, the solar bodies and all the rest of the world about him, through the cultural spectacles with which the accident of birth has provided him. For man, at primitive cultural levels, except perhaps in the past too remote for speculation, nature, as we in our sophistication like to abstract it, never exists as a stimulus unaccompanied by a host of traditional associations, the individual items of which have their historical roots in a still more remote past. Every culture, then, whatever its chief or outstanding characteristics may be, includes some traditional way of interpreting natural phenomena, which typifies it. Once a mode of interpretation becomes established in the cultural tradition of a group, it tends to dominate the minds of individuals exposed to it and supplies them with characteristic reaction patterns to all the various types of natural phenomena which they find in the world about them. Therefore, the explanation of customs and beliefs by some simple psychological formula, couched in terms of individual psychology, whether applied to origins or latter developments, is putting the cart before the horse. That is to say, a specific practice or belief, whether found in one tribe or many, never represents a direct psychological response of individuals to some aspect of the outer world. The cultural milieu too early conditions the subjective attitudes as well as the overt behaviors of individuals. For this to be possible, the source of their beliefs and practices is therefore the historic tradition, culture, and the history of the particular customs and beliefs must be pursued at the cultural, not psychological level. The possibility of convergent developments of similar customs and beliefs in different cultures owing not to psychic unity of man, but to the concept that similar end results may come from diverse antecedents is also ignored. The belief that animals have souls, the selection of animal eponyms for social groupings, the propitiation of the spirits of animals, etc., may have conceivably developed in human thought more than once, and from different premises or historical settings. Nor is it necessary to assign specific customs to general attitudes toward animals to an early culture level in the history of all peoples as a characteristic stage of thought or religion. It's more likely that a great many of the differences we observe in our empiric data regarding animals in human history are due to the fact that they arose at different epochs, in different places, and under different cultural conditions. If there is any plausibility in this view, it affords another argument against superficial classification of data and unitary explanations. On the other hand, similarities were actually shown to exist, particularly if they occur in contiguous areas, may be due to diffusion or common historical antecedents. For this reason, the geographical distribution of various customs and beliefs is of prime importance as a preliminary to any deductions concerning their history and development. Any study, therefore, of man's relation to the animal world may be approached methodologically from two angles. First is the intensive study of animals from the point of view of a particular culture. This would include their utilitarian aspects, the native classification of the species, as well as the role of animals in mythology, art, magico-religious belief, and so forth. While highly desirable, this sort of study should begin in the field with an ethnozoological investigation such as Harrington made for the Tiwa, as preliminary to the investigation of beliefs and customs. Unfortunately, data of this kind are not available for most primitive tribes. Second, comparative studies may be made with, on the economic side, bring out the similarities and differences which characterize the use of related species in different cultures. At the psychological level, this approach may be utilized to bring out the role which the same animals play in different cultures and the similar role of different animals. Or we may start with specific customs and beliefs which are connected with the same or different animals in various cultures. If the cultures studied are contiguous, the problem assumes greater significance because there is always the possibility that light may be thrown upon the historical connections of these cultures.